All right. Buenas noches, amigos y amigas. Good evening. Uh, Guten Abend. I am here transmitting today in English. We are going to have a Tertuliando en Cuarentena in English, as I have not, I have not been responsible enough with my German, and my guest has not been responsible enough with the Spanish. So we're going to do this in English. All right. So today, almost evening time here, and very much morning time, where my good friend is sitting at this very moment from Australia. So, sin más preámbulo, without any more hesitation, let's bring my friend Angus. ¿Cómo estás? How are you, my friend?
Hello, muy bien, gracias. Necesito practicar más mi español, pero yeah, it's not working for me right
Well,
now.
that right there threw a lot of people off. I'm sure that
Yeah,
it's we can it feels like we can just continue in Spanish with everything you just said right there.
yeah.
Um,
We could try.
so
We could try German, see how that goes.
Oh no, amigo, no. I see that's where I'm super flunking. It's been now I've been probably like a few weeks without entering that realm, and what's gonna come out of my mouth is just gonna be a disgrace to the German language and to Germans everywhere. So for the respect I have for my fellow German friends and fellow Germans, I do not wish to enter into that zone. So we begin and we open this space of Tertuliando en Cuarentena for those who are tuning in. Some of you on the other side of the world, because Angus you're in Sydney right now, right?
I'm in Sydney right now. Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's I
morning.
believe 20 after 9 in the morning over there.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So it's 6:20 p.m. where I'm at, and it's 7:20 p.m. where my fellow Puerto Ricanos are at right now. So we got a quite a broad scope of timing, and that makes this conversation all the more interesting. Something that we like to begin in Tertuliando en Cuarentena, which is this intentional space of conversation and dialogue, of just open, genuine vulnerability, of really not much of an impromptu, not much of a script, other than the fact that I'll have a guest, and that guest, I guess, is as scripted as I am, in the sense that that person is, I advertise this person going to be here. But other than that, other than, hey, how you doing? How's it going in this time of quarantine, in this time of COVID-19? And that's where I like to start things off. So where were you pre-COVID? Where are you during COVID? And how have you navigated that transition and that contrast? If you can tell us a little bit about that, and like from a personal point, but also what your observations are, in terms of society, your social observations in the
Mm.
midst of these COVID times.
Well, I came back. So I've been living in Berlin, and I came back just before Christmas. So in December, and my plan was to usually when I come once a year, and I spend maybe 6 to 8 weeks here in Australia with the family, and then I'm usually back in Berlin sometime in February, late January, February, and that was kind of my timeline. And then there were a few family things going on here, and um, I decided, oh, look, I might just stay another month and stay till the beginning of March or maybe April. Um, but I had this trip planned. I hadn't booked everything, but I sort of had it planned in terms of like getting back to Berlin and getting back to work. And there was like not much happening in terms of work anyway at the start of the year. So I thought if I can get back, let's say April, um, I might even do a trip to Bali on the way, then that'll be great. So I was like busy here, and then suddenly COVID hit, and I was thinking, okay, so yeah, it was sort of it hit, but it was like the lead up was interesting because it was happening. But in my head, I was like, well, maybe I'll just skip the Asia part and not do that holiday, and I'll just fly straight back to Europe. And actually, good friends of mine who were from Sydney just moved to Berlin. So I was talking to them about, look, I'll meet you over there in a few weeks, and I'll be there. I can help you set up and show you around town. And they moved, and 2 weeks later it was lockdown, and so I've been stuck here, and these friends of mine are over in Berlin, and so I was, yeah, it was all a bit confusing and weird. Um, I mean, aside from the travel plans, just I think trying to think about um, what it means in terms of what is my life, because I'm sort of in this limbo state where I'm at home, I'm with my family, but this isn't really been where my life has been for the last few years. So
Mm-hmm.
trying to create some sort of um, I don't know, structure to my days and to my weeks, um, and then at the same time not really, I mean, having to accept that there isn't really a structure right now. Um, and everything that was kind of established is if it hasn't been dismantled, is kind of at least up for questioning. So that's kind of my personal experience so far. And I still am eager. Obviously, I have to get back to Germany at some point when it's appropriate to travel there. But I've been thinking also a lot about, well, okay, what is Berlin? What is Germany for me? What has my life there been, and everything that I've created, and what is more important? Um, or, what are my priorities? So I've had a lot of time to think about those kinds of questions as well.
And being in, being home, as far as, as far as the, the place where you have, grown up, the place that has seen you develop, and the fact that you're there amongst your family. I guess there's a good part of that that feels like home. uh being being home during these times, compared to being home in the everyday scenario, how has that been, as much as you feel comfortable in sharing, how has that been with your, with the, maybe the evolution of your interpersonal relationships amongst your family in a time like this? Are you like ripping each other's hairs out, like, oh, how is that dynamic? And because, just as you said, you've been also having this moment of reflection of what does it mean to be in Germany. It kind of puts us in a spot where you probably having these intentional or these accidental moments of reflection. What is it like to navigate this, with your family, as much as you feel comfortable sharing?
Well, usually when I'm home, I'm staying in my parents' apartment. So that was kind of the arrangement that I had set up. So I've basically been here now for uh, almost 5 months. And yeah, I mean, you sort of have to weigh up the pros and the cons, because, um, there were definitely moments last year between jobs where, so I'm after this. Obviously, my career does not have any kind of stability or predictability. So I basically, between jobs, spent a lot of time reflecting. So this reflection is kind of normal for me. But I noticed last year that there are definitely times where I was, broke and lonely and not sure what I was doing and when is the
Hmm.
next job coming, and things kind of happen so quickly in my work. So I did feel like, if I was at home in my home country, I would be able to this time spend time with my niece and my nephew and hang out with my parents, and um, and sort of feel like I'm taking part in my family on a
Got it.
very day-to-day basis. I sort of feel like there's so much empty space. I could be feeling this with family moments, but because I'm so far away, I just can't. It's not possible. So now the opposite of that is, here I am forced to be in lockdown with the family, and that also reminds me of, yeah, just those those dynamics which probably every family has, the dynamics I have with my brothers and my parents. And so on the one hand, I definitely somebody that needs space. I need quiet. I need mental quiet and physical quiet. I'm lecturing my parents about turning the news off because um, even if it's just sort of like this blur in the background, I just like it just irritates me. So things like that, you know. But at the same time, you have to appreciate this unique moment, I guess. You know, I'm never probably after this going to spend this much time staying with my parents. So, and you know, our parents aren't around forever, so I've kind of got to weigh up the good and the bad and the pros and cons of the situation. And some things are definitely uncomfortable, and there are things that are great, you know. So, and I get to hang out with my niece and nephew, which I get to very much. Um, you know, the weather here has been pretty good, although we're going into winter. I'm very lucky. So, um, yeah, it's just, I think it's just really day to day. I think it's managing for me, it's managing my, you know, this is the situation. So if I need space, I leave, I go to the park, I go for a run, um, hang out with a friend or hang out with my brother at his house. Yeah.
Claro, claro. I guess trying to redefine the the setting and the context that we find ourselves in, which is that which we're obligated to be in that space. And sometimes in that sort of apprehension or in that obligation is the only maybe timing and space that we're going to find ourselves in close proximity with our family members through that length amount of time. So how can we turn that into, how can we CBT that and make a cognitive behavior therapeutic approach where we're redeeming that space and not only looking at the negative aspect of it, given the fact that we're already there. I'm already here. What do I do with the already here that I am? You know, in as honestly and as sincerity as we can, because obviously, going from living by ourselves and then that, of course, is going to represent kind of like a brushing every now and then, but it doesn't have to always be like that. I guess it's it definitely can be
No.
a tutoring experience for ourselves. I like to I like to ask the people that come over, and it's an opportunity for the guest, for the person to share a little bit about their life, a little bit about life's journey to where they are now, uh, and just the whole pilgrimage. Ever since it was little Angus running around, um, chasing kangaroos because that's all Australians do when they're kids. You know, is that they do all they do? They just
Yeah.
chase kangaroos and koalas and um, so from if you can think of three moments at the very least three moments in your life that you consider were cathartic, were catalíticos, were formative in the person you are right now. It could be as long ago as when you were a kid, or as recently as last week, or just a
Mm.
few hours ago. Moments in your life that you figure were very transformative. It could be incidents in particular, or just processes that you were going through, that you would like to share, that you think were important to form the person who you are right now.
It's, yeah, well, what's interesting is I was just, you know, with all this being at home, helping my mom clear out one of her junk rooms. I say one of her junk rooms. There are many. Um, and
Be
I
careful,
found
your mom
box
could be listening.
of yeah, I know she might be tuning in. No, I found a box which I don't think I had seen in over 10 years, which had like school photographs and school diaries and stuff. And there was a an envelope in this box which had been sent to the family from a director who directed me in a short film that I did when I was about 8 years old, 7 or 8 years old. And this was like one of the kind of the key moments of my childhood. I think, I don't know if it was like the one defining moment where I thought I wanted to be an actor, but
Was this that movie with the
This,
Spanish title?
yeah, El Angelito.
What is it called again?
El Angelito.
El Angel. Oh, like a little me. El Angelito. Qué chévere. Was it a Spanish
Yeah,
film?
I was, yeah, Chilean.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah. So I can send you the link if you want to see it.
Sí, 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 claro. Of
The full
course.
thing.
Of course, of course, of course.
Yeah. So I reconnected with this director when Facebook started a few years ago, maybe 6 or 7 years ago. We sort of found each other. So we were in touch again. Um, and anyway, so I had a copy of this film on VHS, but I hadn't seen it in years. And anyway, I found this box which had the script, I had call sheets, I had from like all of this material from the production shoot, which was in 1994. And I was just going through it like blew my mind because this was really there were some photographs of me on set, and this reminded me how much this film was probably a moment where I'd already been thinking about, being an actor when I grow up, but I think that experience was something where I felt that experience of having been on set and kind of make believing and playing this character and like really diving into this experience of like everything here is fake, but we're pretending it's real and it felt real. That was a really kind of key moment in my childhood. Um, and so finding all that material in this box last night was kind of cool because yeah, that was I didn't even think I had that stuff lying around. Um, And then, as I got older, probably, I mean, we grew up, we grew up Catholic, so that was always a theme, you know, throughout my childhood and school. And
What was it? What was the theme? Sorry, you
and
cut off
so
there.
then growing up Catholic,
Okay, okay.
yeah. Um, and so yeah, went to Catholic boys' school, so that was also part of that. And when I was around 16, 17, maybe, I started going to an evangelical church. Um, and that was probably another key moment because that was in that sort of formative teenage time, uh, was a huge moment in terms of
Claro.
um, forming some sort of deep spirituality or
Hmm.
understanding of religion and God. And obviously, things have evolved a lot since then. That moment, I think, sort of set me on a path where I, on one hand, kind of like was shrinking myself into something because maybe there was afraid to engage with life fully, or maybe because yeah, I don't know, it's something I still need to explore. But um, I think on the other hand, it sort of opened me up to something other than what I was used to in sort of
Claro, of
like a
course.
sort of Catholic worldview, um, and yeah, so that was definitely a key moment around 17. Yeah.
Do you
Think
do
of
you have
more.
any other memory you have of maybe more recent years that you feel that uh was another fork in that road?
There was probably one about 5 years ago. I would say right now is probably a fork in the road.
Hmm.
Too soon to say what that even means. But there was probably one about 5 years ago, 6 years ago when I had been living in Germany for about five or so years, and I'd come back to Australia, and I'd been here for about a year or 18 months, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do, if I was going to stay in Australia, if I wanted to go to London, go to LA. Um, and I just remember it was kind of like I was getting signs, or like what I was interpreting was just like something was pulling me back to Berlin. I was just like, I have to go back there. Um, and so I was like, well, what job? Like, what's my plan? I didn't really have a plan. And then it escalated, and suddenly I had a film screening at a German film festival in Australia, which opened doors back in Berlin. Then my agent called me and said, there's a TV show that wants to cast you in a small role. You can come back in 3 weeks' time. Can you just book a flight and come? So suddenly I was on this flight back to Germany, and I thought, right, I'll just stay for 6 months and see where this goes. And then that was 2014, middle of 2014. So that's almost 6 years now. And since then, my career kind of like took off. I started getting a lot of television work and voiceover work, and just this last period, I get the last sort of 5 to 6 year period of my life.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot actually been going on. So it's been interesting because that moment was like, really, it felt like I was making decisions, but it was like I could feel that I was being pulled there. It was sort of a slight pull. And I didn't have all the answers. I was just kind of following an impulse, which is something I'm trying to tune into a little bit now.
Mm-hmm. Trust that a bit more.
If that makes sense. Yeah, I can't even really describe it. It's like I was getting clear answers. I just knew that there was like a shift. There was something I had to do to change something. And out of all of the ideas I had, this idea of Berlin was just so clear. Even though I didn't have the answer, it felt clear. And then things started manifesting that pulled me over there.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
It kind of confirmed that, kind of like, moving forward, that left right step, that walking motion towards something that might seem a bit unsure, but then you get these, invitations very, very concretely.
Yeah.
What was the as an actor, as someone who is pursuing the acting field, one is usually expected. I want to make that clarification, to look at the United States of America, and to look at the United States of America, specifically Los Angeles. It's kind of like the heightened, or New York, but I guess New York maybe is more theatric. Los Angeles is more like filmic and television. When you're in this moment, of your life, that you see yourself going down that path of acting, why not go to the US? What pulls you to, I guess the question really is, what pulls you to Germany initially? You need to speak German. A little bit I know about you. You had already taken a little bit of German before, but what ended up making it concrete that you are going to explore this in Deutschland, in Germany? What makes it tangible for you?
Why Germany? Yeah, that's a question I get a lot. A lot of Germans ask me that. Well, when I went to Germany, the first time I went, the first time I ever went was in high school. I did like a sort of school language trip.
Mm-hmm.
But then after that, when I moved there, I wasn't really intending to stay a long time. My plan was to go for a year and take some German classes, and to make some acting classes in German. And but yeah, in that first year, which was 2008 to 2009, a few things happened. I had some good friends, and I was going to an acting school, and I found a German agent that represented foreign actors, usually English-speaking actors,
Mm-hmm.
which I had no idea that was going to be something, or something that would be possible in Germany. So I think that's kind of where it really started. And as the years went on, like I would get bit parts here and there. So the concept of like being able to work in Germany was like, oh, this is nice. Like I didn't expect that, and I wasn't earning a huge living from it, but it was just like cool. But at the same time, I still had this idea of America and like going to LA, and I have a lot of acting friends who are, working in LA and who were going between Australia and the US. So that was an idea that I thought, wow, okay, if I could explore that. And that was something that I did think about in that period when I wasn't sure which road to take.
Mm-hmm.
I guess one of the hurdles, of course, is dealing with visas and immigration and all of the paperwork and the red tape. That's probably been one of the big barriers. Also, you have to have quite a bit of money saved up to pay for, lawyer fees and everything. So I just had that. I'd explored that, but I hadn't really followed through because of whatever obstacle, whether it's financial or just fees and stuff. So, and because those doors in Berlin kept opening, that was just where I kept going back and staying. And of course, there were moments where I was like, oh, how long should I sit around? There are like 3 months go by, I haven't worked. You kind of start thinking, oh, should I be doing something else? But then, something will come up. That's what's interesting about life. So it has pushed me to the point where I'm like, okay, I should maybe do something else. And then bam, like some little job comes or a door opens or, yeah. So I guess the German thing is kind of like it felt like I've chosen Germany to begin with, choosing me. So that's been the main reason why that's just where a lot of the work has come for me. And it's much easier in terms of getting my visa, and I speak the language I did in school. Actually, the other thing that was interesting was going through these boxes last night. I was finding a lot of school projects, and German. We were learning German from age 11, so finding school books and school projects and stuff that Germany from that age was really interesting, because it was almost like I didn't choose German as a language to learn. It was just what we were given in school. So I just to enjoy it. So
It's interesting those things that we choose, and then those things that kind of choose us. And in that
yeah,
exploration of the accidentality of life, and obviously it is in that reflection, looking back, looking in that rear view mirror of the many things that kind of puzzle each other together to give, not to finish the puzzle, that's never going to happen, but to give a more coherent picture of what might be taking place, even if that picture might be very abstract in its artistic definition, and it might not make all that definitive sense as we might want it to make. And in that moment, you mentioned like being in these gaps of 2 3 months without having a concrete job in the acting world. uh, I w- I'll take the liberty and the freedom in assuming that you must be a very patient person.
uh, it doesn't come with stress, that's for sure. um, yeah, I would say there've definitely been challenging periods, but I don't know if it's patience, because I don't know if it's I don't know if I'm waiting. I'm sort of maybe I'm waiting on one level in terms of when is the next job so I can
Mm-hmm.
earn some money. Um, those periods, but I have other things that I do as well that kind of. And I think as I'm getting older, I explore different things in life. It's not just me being an actor. And I have great friends. I have great support network where I live in Germany. So there are things that I do and occupy my mind with other than just acting work. To keep me enriched, basically, you know. So yeah, I think it's comparing it like even 10 years ago, it was like, yeah, I want to do this acting thing, and that is still there, and that love for it is still there. But there are other things that life has shown me as well, also very important to me. Um, and so I think they're the things that I fall to when when the work when the work area is quiet, then these are the things I'm doing basically. You know, what am I doing with time and my energy? Yeah.
But have you come to terms in accepting that that's kind of part of the package deal that you are that you have come to accept as the modus operandi, the modus of operation, and how maybe not exactly in 100% how it works, but kind of how it works. That these gaps are going to be there, and as far as like paying your due rent or paying your like keeping afloat, as far as having food to eat to begin with, then you are aware of these spaces to maybe fill it up with other things, but also not completely throw out the baby with the bathwater and say it's enough with this.
Yeah. I think it definitely takes some sort of um, skill, or you have to be very aware of what you're doing with your time and your
Mm-hmm.
energy, and you have to be. I mean, something I've had to learn is utilize time, but utilize focus, and so that usually means for me, like when there is a project I'm working on, it's usually like long days of shooting. I have to prepare, so there's a lot of like focus involved and energy and time, but it's usually compacted into like a certain period,
Mm-hmm.
and after that there's suddenly all this space and all of this time. um, so I think it's finding a balance to you're doing stuff and you're engaging with life enough that you don't become energetically lazy, if that makes any
Mm-hmm.
sense. I sort of feel like um, I've gotten better at, whether it's through yoga, through doing sport, whether it's through other leisure activities or interests or travel or whatever, that I'm sort of like using that focus on something, that when work comes, I still have that muscle to use. Because it can often be like, oh, I channel all my energy really intensely into something, and then suddenly that job is over, and no money, but all of this time. Or maybe I have money because I've just worked, but then all of this time, and like, oh, what do I do now? Because I've defined myself as something and only this one thing, then it becomes very limiting. um, I'm an actor, so this is everything, and I do it.
Yeah.
And when I'm doing it, there's a crisis because what am I doing? Um, so I think that's been a journey as well for me. Is also realizing that when I do work, sometimes it doesn't fulfill me. You know, maybe it fulfills me in the sense of like, oh, I feel relief because I'm earning an income.
Yeah.
But not every project is going to creatively fulfill me. Um, or at times, maybe there are moments where I feel great and other moments where I hate it. So it's also understanding that maybe it's like a relationship. You have highs and lows, and you're not always going to feel that libido for it. But there will be times where it's incredible. Yeah.
Do you have a
I don't anything
specific?
I just said made any sense.
No, it did commit. It made complete sense because it talks about those ups and downs, or I guess those metaphoric ups and downs, and those very literal ups and downs. Do you have a recollection speaking about depositing yourself into a project that you are that maybe you find relevance in and that you find a challenge creatively? Can you point to a particular project and perhaps maybe in your time in Germany that it did give you that compensation of feeling happy about it, that it did challenge you, and you saw the project as something worthy of doing other than the fact that it would pay you, but you were there artistically as well? Can you think of an instance?
Yeah, there was a TV show that I did about 3 years ago. Yeah, about 3 years ago now, which was basically a mini series which they've been doing for a few years, and they sort of release 1 or 2 episodes a year. So it's like a feature length episode about a German diplomat. She gets sent to different posts around the world, and so in this episode, she is the new German ambassador in Prague. So I play an American Marine who who had been stationed in Germany. So he spoke German, and he finds out all of this dark crime stuff from the CIA. So he's conflicted with this because he's religious as well. So he's you know morally conflicted with his obligation to his job, but then he's seeing what crimes he's seeing being committed by the CIA. He runs away and tries to get asylum in in Germany, and he's sort of hiding in embassies. So it's like this Snowden type sort
Mm-hmm.
of
Yeah, quite similar.
vibe to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, although it's just German television, so it's nothing good. But it was definitely it was fun, and it was challenging because there were so many elements to the character that I had to explore. So it gave me like a lot in terms of like he'd been to Iraq, so there was some trauma he was working with. There was the religious side. There was him speaking German. He's in Prague, so he's in Czech Republic. So like all of these different elements, which was like, and shooting on location and shooting around Prague was like fun. I had to like find that sort of military stillness and regimented sort of feeling within the
Mm-hmm.
character that was so normal to him, which is not normal for me. It doesn't naturally me. So
How do you prepare for
that was
that?
definitely a project where
Like,
I was really nervous because there wasn't any rehearsal time. Actually, I don't think there was any rehearsal time. um, and all I was doing was just researching about different different stories of service women who had come back from serving in Afghanistan and Iraq, and people who were processing trauma and PTSD,
mm-hmm.
um, stuff like that, because there were elements of that in this character. Um, but what's interesting is often I find that it's hard to, when you're rehearsing with the other actors, you have to, well, for me, I find the physicality, so like having the costume and having the look and having the feel gives me sort of like idea of the character's physical structure, physical makeup. And a lot of that became clear to me um, just before shooting, There's no real way to figure that out unless I actually did it on set.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a few sessions of military training back in Berlin with a guy who works. I think he's German, but he's like a military expert, so he sort of gave me a around with some exercises and showing me how to load the gun and showing how it kind of all physically works, but also in terms of like a little bit of the weaponry and stuff, and to get an idea of what he was used to. The idea of like somebody who can shoot a gun and can like just so effortlessly, for me, that's like what? So just to have that feeling of practicing that, even if it's not in the final film, you don't really, I think you see him have a gun once, he's like, throws it in the river, but to have that is like informs like this would have done what he was used to.
Yeah.
Um,
It's part of the
and
intrinsic mode of the character.
yeah, so that was a creatively fulfilling, financially fulfilling project, and it also opened to me as well in terms of like having a television lead for the first time, seeing it in another language. It's something that I was very proud of afterwards.
Do you have as a foreigner in the acting market, if I can call it that way, in Germany, do you get recognized at all? I mean, have you ever had any of these moments out in public at all, or is it just been just completely sad and no one recognizes you? I mean, that's a luxury
No,
too. I mean,
no,
not have to deal with that, you know?
I don't think. No, I don't really think I don't know. I've had fan mail, but I haven't had people come up to me. I don't think. I've had friends come up to me, or like friends of friends who know who I am, like as a person, come up. They've seen stuff, but I haven't had like a complete stranger come to me, which is kind of nice. I don't think, especially in a place like Berlin, they don't really care for celebrity or that kind of thing in the same way people do in
The
like
U.S.
London or LA or even Australia, like you might be like, oh, that's cool, but it's really not a huge deal. So yeah, I think I've just gotten fan mail because I had a role on a German soap opera, and some of these diehard fans of this show kind of like to have autographs of every actor who's ever appeared on the show.
Oh, okay,
So
collectors.
yeah, they're collectors. So I get requests for autographs
Like a
sometimes,
headshot with
but
your.
yeah,
That's cool.
which
That's
I don't
something I don't
have.
get.
So it's yeah. I mean, it's flattering, but it's also weird because I don't have those autograph cards, so I have to physically go somewhere to print something and then sign it, which feels weird.
You got to do what you got to do.
But,
You got to do what you got to do with what you have.
but that doesn't happen. It doesn't happen a lot. It doesn't happen a
Claro.
lot. Like it happened for like a short period when I was on the show, and like it stops.
You know, in the time that you spent, in the time that you've been living in Germany, how has being in Germany, or what has Germany given you to, and this is a personification of a country. What has Germany given you to make you feel that you find a little bit of home there? Being in the diaspora and away from your motherland, Australia. How has it? Or maybe this is a commentary on you too. How have you made it feel like home? But also, what have you found in there? And not necessarily things that remind you of home, but just how have you made it? How have you made it home? Socially, spiritually as well. How have you made it your nest? If you have, maybe you haven't. Maybe I'm assuming you have.
I think, yeah, but I think a lot of that has to do with people that I have around me there. Um, I mean, I have my own apartment there, which is great, and like in terms of, I have like a base, and that's been important to me because for a period I was like hopping from place to place looking for
Yeah, it doesn't
an
help.
apartment and staying with friends and like that whole nightmare. And then so I've got my own place now, and that's really nice. And I have a little setup, so that's good. I have like a structure to my own, day-to-day life. Um, so that's I've had that for years. Like that's been probably one thing. I have an address. I have like, as we say in Berlin, like because you don't have like in Australia apartments number, so you don't have your name written on the door. But in Germany, you don't have numbered apartments. It's your surname is on the doorbell. So like, say you're an adult in Berlin when you have your name on the door on the bell.
Makes sense.
Um, which I've had now for like 5 years. So I'm like, okay, I've been out for 5 years. But yeah, I think so much has to do with, I guess, the people because I have some amazing friends there. I've got,
German friends or
just
also
friends,
people from all
German
over?
friends all over, but German friends. I know a lot of Australians. I've got friends from everywhere, basically. Yeah, from all over. And and I guess some of those like core friends who I've known for a long time or who've known me pretty much this whole time I've been over there, seen me grow, and so that makes that having, I guess, that consistency. I'm not someone who's like traveled and lived in 5 different places and spent a long time in place. I've really just like basically lived in Australia and lived over there and like traveled on short trips. But
Hmm.
I guess having that extended period of time and that consistency, that relationship with the place and the people makes it home because that's what I'm also thinking a lot about being here, where I'm sort of stuck here at the moment in Australia. Um, in my reflection, thinking about what Berlin really means to me and realizing how much it is my home. Um, and I think it's hard to see that or feel that when you're in it, but stepping away and seeing it from this angle and from this situation that we're all in now, it's kind of clear that it's home. And whether I'm there, you know, long term or whether I move elsewhere, I think there will still always be a connection to the place, and it will be somewhere I go back to often if I'm not living there.
What are some societal contrasts that you can make from your project of life in Australia and your project of life? I know it's been longer in Australia, but observations can be made. We're constantly making observations, whether we're aware of it or not. I guess is when we enter that mode of being conscious of that awareness, that state of consciousness. What are some contrasts that you can make, just generally or specific in your, and maybe just city wise in your time in Sydney and your time in Australia? What are your time in Sydney and your time in Berlin? What are some things that you can point to that can be quite noticeable contrast? I mean, other than the linguistic aspect, maybe cultural shocks that you might have experienced at the beginning, or funny anecdotes that you might have, that when you travel, they are there, whether you want to admit it or not. There's always funny anecdotes of things that we do or things that we say that on the receiving end were misinterpreted or whatever. I mean, and you're talking also about a country that speaks a different language, so it's not just it's not like being an Australian and going to London, that they do have contrast, but you're talking about whole diverse of things that are different. But I'm curious to find out, maybe in your time living there, what you could communicate as some.
Well, yeah, I guess there are definite truths to some of those stereotypes. Um, but the benefit of living somewhere long enough that you see beyond them and you see, you know, more to just that.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to think of something that maybe when I first went to Germany, I mean, I was so excited to be there, to be like this place and this language I was learning, and but there were moments where I was like, because especially Berliners can be quite gruff, so quite direct. Kind of compare the New York temperament a little bit to Berlin. It's like very direct and very like,
It's fast
even if it's
paced.
endearing, it's still like a little bit, yeah, it's like, so that was a bit of a shock because I was like, man, they're being so rude.
Quite blunt.
These Berliners. Yeah, and after a while, you just it's called in German the Berliner Schnauze, and they're notorious for it around Germany. Like people know, other Germans know that you go to Berlin, they have this Berliner Schnauze, meaning like they're grumpy and they like just say it to your face. But having said that, like Berlin is such a melting pot, so
Yeah.
it's not the only thing you're getting. You're
Mm-hmm.
getting so much. Um, so I don't know. I mean, maybe there have been moments where there's like that idea of the like, you know, the laid back Australian versus the like uptight German.
Mm.
But what's interesting is there's definitely elements of both of that in me. There's laid back Aussie, and then when I come to Australia, I notice there's like that maybe like organized and square kind of version of myself as well. But what I also find interesting is meeting Australians, for example, who have been resident in Germany for a long time, much longer than me. And there are a few of them that I know, and to me, I'm like, okay, I can hear that they're Australian, but the way they are, they actually seem more German to me.
Mm.
Um, and then the other side is I've met Germans or Europeans that have lived in Australia for, a long time, 10 or 20 years, and they feel very much more Australian. They sort of draw this whatever stereotype they're known for, and embrace that Aussie laid back, sunny thing. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's, yeah, maybe there's elements of all of that in me, and I see, and also because I know a lot of Australians in Berlin, I kind of get my dose of that anyway. Um, and in terms of like culturally though, like I think what I appreciate a lot in Germany is just the respect for the arts,
Mm-hmm.
and in Berlin in particular, like Berlin has always been, throughout history, it's always been this place of exploration and experimentation and wildness and craziness and creativity and self-expression and self-exploration. And I think that's why so many people are attracted to the place. And maybe even if that is an anomaly within Germany, it still says something about the country that
It
that
does.
that somehow this little hotspot within its borders exists, and we don't have anything like that anywhere in the world, and we don't have it in Australia. Um, and I think it's the source of like, yeah, so much inspiration for Australians because they go there and they feel like, oh, here's a place I can actually be myself and explore myself and express it and be creative and feel like my creativity is valued. Um, and it's a
Less
little bit
inhibitions.
different here in Australia. Yeah,
Maybe there's less
I don't
inhibitions
know.
in
I
that
think in
context.
Australia, yeah, less inhibitions, and I think the values are different. As a collective, maybe in Australia we value good weather and the outdoors and sport very much.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah,
I can attest to that in my life. In my life capsule parenthesis that I lived down under. Um,
Yeah.
Something I like to talk about here is, and as we start kind of giving a bit of a landing to this conversation, is the idea of homeland. In Spanish, we have a word. It kind of has a bit of a semantic connection with patriarchy because it's patria, which comes from fatherhood, and patria is that connection to the homeland, to the place that saw us grow up, and sometimes even to the place that saw us, be born and develop our cultural tunings, our cultural discernment, our the place that formed us. As a person who was born, right? You were born in Australia and raised in Australia, correct? And
Yeah.
as you travel, as you see right there behind me, you see my Puerto Rican flag. For me, that it there there's a lot that is behind. There's a lot of symbol and a lot of meaning behind that, and that comes to a climax when I'm in the diaspora, when I am away from that land, from that small space, from that small island, from that home space. It takes a whole new meaning when I'm away from it. For you, where where in your sense of life and belonging does does being Australian play a defining internal sentiment. Like for us Puerto Ricans, as we see the
Mm.
Olympics, and then we have an event like, for example, like 4 years ago, when we had Monica Pui was a tennis player, which maybe you found out. She ended up um, defeating Angela Angelique Kerber, which is a German professional tennis player. So this underdog Puerto Rican, and I remember watching that tournament with alongside with Melanie. She was a bit upset, and I was a bit happy. But that, like, I mean, in Puerto Rico, it's almost like the country stops when you have these sporting events, and then and I think you have a little bit of that figure of the underdog. Not that we feel small. We
Yeah.
definitely do not feel small. I mean, having exported such great talents like Ricky Martin, Mark Anthony, all these great talents in the world, we don't feel small in that sense. But when we have sporting events and we face off with the United States, everyone is tuning in, regardless of their political affiliation. Even those that are pro statehood and those that are pro independence, they're there and they have a place of identity, and they're like, here we go. Everything stops. How does it work for you? Like, what are your feelings what are your feelings as an Australian when you are in the diaspora? When you find yourself, for example, living in Berlin, how does that feel for you? I'm super interested in
Hmm. Well, I guess there I feel like, I don't know. I mean, do I feel Australian? I guess I do, because I am. Um, and obviously that's shaped largely the large portion of my sense of, well, not everything. I don't necessarily put everything in a basket. Like everything I do is because I'm Australian.
hmm
Um, but also in one way, Germany wasn't so foreign to me because it's been a language and a culture that I've had since school. So really, German belongs to that Australian part of me because it was part of my education. So it was familiar in the same way that like British culture might be familiar, even if we're not British, but we're familiar with it because our culture is derived from it.
hmm
Um, so I guess having German language and German cultural studies as part of my education made that really familiar. So when I'm there, I don't feel like, yes, I'm Australian, but I can feel that I'm not German, but I still feel that I am part of that in a way. And I don't really know how to articulate that. Um, I guess, when do I feel the most Australian though?
How do you feel when you encounter another Australian?
Over there?
Yeah, like
Um,
in that moment, just at a
I'm
random.
kind
I
of,
know it is the
kind of,
melting pot, but or maybe in in any part of the
yeah.
world that you might encounter
Mm.
another person from wherever in Australia, not Sydney necessarily.
Well, yeah, I'm sort of indifferent to it now because there are so many. And I was actually been hosting a podcast with a good friend of mine. We were interviewing Australian artists who were based in Berlin. So I have a network of a lot of Australian creative artists. Um, so yeah, when I meet Australians, I don't. It's not like we bond over that. Like, hey, oh, g'day, mate. Like,
You don't buy on a
either I'm interested in
Vegemite
them
or
as a
something. Have
person.
a
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's not. But you know what is cool is when I'm working overseas and I'm an Australian in the crew. That I like. I think that's cool. Um,
why?
because well, it happened just recently when I was shooting this film at the end of the year in Berlin, just before I came back, and I knew that there were a few Australian actors in the production. I don't know, but um, the day that I was on set, I was working with um, one of the set runners was Australian. That one of the assistant costume assistants was Australian. There was somebody else that was Australian, someone else in the crew. Um, and so like this girl came up, she was, fixing up my outfit, and then I was like, oh, you're Aussie. And she's like, yeah. Um, and then she said, oh, sorry, am I allowed to talk with you in the accent? And I said, yeah, that's absolutely, I'd love to. I was playing American.
Oh,
And then
okay,
I
okay.
heard later, because Guy Pearce is in the film. Apparently, Pearce requested that any Australian crew members not speak him in accent because he didn't want to be,
Yeah, screw you off.
he
Yeah.
wanted to stay in his American. Yeah, so he was focused on his American accent. So I was like, oh, that's why she asked me. But I
hmm
was like excited because,
At
um,
first, it's kind of funny, having like,
when you,
is it prohibited to speak in America? But I
yeah,
understand the framing
I
of
think
it.
that, and it's like in that specific context of being
hmm
on a film production where the crew is largely German and American. So, and you hear Aussies, like, oh, we got a little bond here, which is nice. And it also happened when I did that TV show where I played the American soldier.
hmm
On one of the days we were shooting between the takes, we were shooting in a car, so I couldn't hear. I was like, I could hear somebody speaking like English with an Australian accent, or maybe it's British, and I was like really listening. And then I saw one of the sound guys, and I was like, "Are you Australian?" He's like, "No, I'm a Kiwi." I was like, "What?" I was like, "How is a Kiwi shooting a German film production in Prague?" And he was married to a Czech woman and had been in Prague for a few years, and yeah, was doing like television stuff, and so that was cool. We had a little Kiwi thing going on set for a few days.
And that's beautiful.
um,
I mean, and that's
and that was nice because yeah, because in that context, like the crew was German and Czech, so I was kind of more engaged in my
hmm
Germanness um, in that, and then suddenly there was an opening with the Kiwi for me to be like, oh, okay, I can be Aussie for a bit. Um, yeah. But then, there's the other side, which a lot of people don't know. I don't know if you were going to touch on this, was the Trinidad side.
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead. Feel free for sure. Feel free.
Yeah.
In terms because
Well, I mean, because
the little I do know about you is that I know your mom is from Trinidad and Tobago, and your dad is I guess naturally from Australia. And I've as a Puerto Riqueño, kind of having a little bit of a neighboring effect there with your, with your heritage. Being a Caribeño or Caribbean, I find that quite interesting, and also any form of people coming together and sitting down in a metaphoric way or in a very literal way, I find completely interesting, because I think is emblemic and is symbolic of life, as life is the eclecticity, or whatever,
Yeah.
the just the plurality, people coming together. It is what life is. Anything other than that is a myth. Any notion of purity as a completely untouched singular lineage is disparate, and it's unreal, and it's mythical. It does not exist. It does not exist. So this just speaks as to what life is as a whole. So you have this inside your veins. You have this in your genes. So this is something that is participated in the formation of you, whether you want to accept it or not. It's just in you. But now, the more intentional aspects of it, or the more vivid and tangible aspects of it, how is it like? The Are those cultural elements present in your life? How have they been present, with your mom, with your grandparents? Tell us a little bit about that. The first time I knew about Trinidad and Tobago was watching long ago a Miss Universe contest, a Miss Universe pageant, and I remember Trinidad and
She won.
Tobago, yeah, and that brought attention to it, and I thought it was remarkable, and that's where I realized that Trinidad and Tobago was quite nearby. Geographic ignorance was at that moment, at least as far as Trinidad and Tobago was, eradicated for me. I knew where it came from. I knew where it was. I knew at that point. So tell us a little bit about, educate us as a little bit about Trinidad and Tobago, and what is it to have that in Australia.
Well, I mean, Trinidad, I've been growing up, so obviously, mum being from Trinidad, that was just normal. Um, but it felt a little bit different because in Australia, we had kids who had all different backgrounds in school, Greek, Chinese, Lebanese, whatever. Um, but people will usually kind of know the stock standard immigrant backgrounds you get, the sort of usual um, sort of guess that everyone would ask
Hmm.
any kid, like, where are you from? Are you Greek? Are you Italian? Are you Lebanese? Are you Chinese? But Trinidad was just never on the radar. It was just never ever. So I always had this sense that, like, I was a little bit different because, like, my mom was from a place that nobody's heard of. So I always have to explain Trinidad. It's like an island. Caribbean is like on the literal other side of the world. But we also grew up in that small little Caribbean community here in Sydney, and mum mum and dad have been part of that community for a long time, especially through cricket, because like Australia, the West Indies is a big cricket region.
Hmm.
So yeah, we had that, and we had yeah, the music, the community events, and the food as well. So that was all very familiar, this cultural. So I guess, even touching on that idea, this of being Australian, Australian identity, I have had full Australian identity, even though I do identify as Australian largely. Like, there's still that portion of me, like, yeah, but there's still another something else in there.
Claro.
Um, and as I get older, I'm way more interested in that. I've been hanging out with a few Trinis in Germany. I'm good friends with a Trinidadian guy who runs the German Trinidad Association. And so they
Oh,
put on events, and he's an amazing, he cooks amazing food. Um, so he's become a really good friend, and it's great because it's maybe that's something I've been also longing for, is a way to reconnect with that, because I didn't grow up there. We spent time there when I was a kid. It's just so far away. So I haven't been there in 25 years. Um, so for me to find ways to connect to that culture, to because it's literally 50% of my blood, is very important. And that's also the other side to German to me is Australian, and maybe in some ways projecting their idea of stereotypical Australian onto me. I don't even really fit that because I'm like
Claro.
not
Yeah.
only I'm like half, but I'm also half from a country you probably haven't heard of.
Yeah. Yeah.
So although Germans generally know about Trinidad, a lot of Germans go there. They go to Tobago.
To vacation.
But yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
It's like Germans. It's like
So
Germans to Mallorca.
yes, they go to Mallorca, and then if they have a little more money, they might go to Tobago. um, that's what, like I said, I don't even. I mean, my good friends obviously, but it's like Germans generally know me as the Aussie Trini. It's just like the Australian, and I've had a few Germans say to me like, "You don't look Australian." And I'm like, I know why they're saying it, but it's like, well, if you've been to Australia, like nobody really looks Australian unless you want me to be like the blonde guy,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
you
Right.
know, which is one Australian look, but it's just one.
But of course, is more caricaturized. So therefore, the world PR has grandized it and made it something to be known for.
I've had to play Australian. I played Australian a couple of times on German TV, um, with like terrible costume choices and just really wanting to go for this stereotype, right? And I caught myself feeling like a phony because I mean, how is it possible I could feel like a phony playing in my own nationality,
Claro.
my own accent, my own. I was like, oh, they want me to be the stereotype,
The
but I'm not the
stereotype.
stereotype.
Yeah.
Maybe should I mention Trinidad? Should I? Do you know, like,
To make it more real, make it more real.
so but then you just go, look, I'll just go that they're paying me.
It's a job. It's a job that I'm going to play this role. Something
Yeah.
I also like to explore is and it's super interesting. Just the fact that and maybe when you like the question I asked before about like when you encounter someone from Australia, someone from down under, maybe when you encounter someone from Trinidad, I'm sure that feels more special. You know,
Yeah, yeah, it is
do
absolutely like that's how this whole thing happened. It was just randomly meeting a Trinidadian lady at the markets in Berlin, and I was like, "So long have you been here?" That to me is way more interesting than meeting an Aussie,
because it's
because
more
we say
rare.
Trinidadians are. Yeah, you mean the Trinidadians are everywhere. You'll find a Trinidadian anywhere. You gotta like, look. You really gotta like dig
Yeah,
a
yeah,
little
yeah.
and explore. And so when
Can
you
you
find one, it's like, oh
Can
my
you
god,
can you can you point
and
them out like whether it be through the accent or like because I can point out Puerto Ricans. I mean not like 100% accuracy, but it'll be something and you're like I have a feeling, I have an inkling that this person might be from. Has that or has that happened to you with someone from Trinidad? Maybe you picked up a bit of an accent or just something, and then it just clicked, or maybe you don't have that radar.
I've I tell a little bit by the accent, but it's also depends on the context,
Mhm.
because I might be hearing it. I'm like, yeah, they could, but they could be from Barbados. They could be from another island, but
Claro, claro, claro.
um, but the accent, the accent, the Trinidadian accent is distinct. But in the context where you know what it is, but you just sort of hear it pass by. I'm like, did I just hear a Trinidad? Oh, I don't know. And you sort of don't want to.
Is it
look like a
easier?
fool
Is it
by
easier for? Of course, yeah. I'd be like, hey, I mean, how do you make that approach? Of course, you want to be as respectful and as tactful as possible. You don't want to like just pull this label on the person. I guess you gotta vibe it up and see whatnot. But I try
Mm,
to make the approach in the sense of maybe making a connection, whether they are Puerto Rican or not.
mm,
Just make a connection. Maybe they could be from Cuba or just from any other Latin American country and whatnot. So the connection is a connection. Do you is it easier for you to pick up that accent in English or in German? If there is
yeah, no, in English. In
in
English,
it
they're speaking German. Yeah, I can't really. I can hear an accent, but I can't specifically hear Trinidad.
because in Trinidad hablan inglés, no? They speak English in Trinidad, no?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so of course that's their home
They
native
learn
language.
Spanish in school.
Okay.
Yeah, they learn Spanish in school, and um, my aunt, for example, she's lived in Spain for over 4 years. So she immigrated to Barcelona, lived
Mm-hmm.
there for a long time, and lives in south of Spain. And I've got like cousins of my mom. I mean, like I said, they're everywhere. My mom has like over 40 cousins, first cousins. So, and be in
Wow,
their 60s,
wow.
70s, 80s. So they are everywhere.
How many siblings
So when I meet another Trini,
how many siblings does your
yeah,
mom have?
she has four siblings. So
And
she's
then
the eldest of five.
and aunties and uncles, how
And
many
then
does she
it's
have?
her, yeah, on each side. No, her mom side, her mom was one of 10, I believe. Yeah.
Wow.
And on her dad side, my grandfather was three, I think. And then that side of the family, so my grandfather's brother immigrated to Venezuela.
Uh-huh.
So I have some distant family in Venezuela who I don't know. I would love to know them. I would love to know that
Claro,
side of the
yeah.
family too. So there is definitely there's this whole there's this whole connection which I could explore, um, which I just find so fascinating. And
It's a huge genealogical
but yeah, I
tree.
think yeah, and then that's the other thing about the German thing is because on my dad's side of the family, my dad's Australian, and his parents. So on my grandfather's side, it was the Scottish with my last name, Ruther. And on my grandmother's side, which is the German bloodline. So it almost feels like this German bloodline came quite strong through
Yeah, yeah,
me.
yeah.
And that's kind of been like reconnecting with that side of the family tree,
Hmm.
because I've got this dad and this. It's just like a melting pot of craziness. I don't know. Yeah,
That's I find that super interesting that you can do a whole thesis on that, and it's more than enough to keep you going for
yeah,
a whole yearly project at the very least, and just uncovering and
yeah,
uncovering that just that assuming that investigative role, from a very personal angle. It's I think it could be very transformative. Could be very very transformative. And I want to close off with part of the four main topics here about talking about the self, talking about our life, talking about our homeland. I want to talk about spirituality because spirituality is kind of what it's kind of where and how we sort of meet. Through our common friend Brett. Meet even at that point it was meeting cybernetically because we didn't meet until I finally went to Berlin con Melanie, which maybe was
yeah,
4 years ago, I think, more or less, maybe 4 years ago. I
yeah. It's
remember
about 3, 4. Yeah,
it was in summer because it was so hot. I have that memory quite vivid. The fact that it was so hot, it was so hot.
we drank beer by the canal that day.
Huh? Say again?
I think we were drinking a beer by the canal,
Yeah, sí, muy bonito,
sitting
very
by the
pretty,
canal.
very pretty by the
Yeah,
water. And I remember riding the subway, and it was so the U-Bahn. It was so hot. It was just, I mean, I was having a cognitive denial of how hot it was inside the four walls of that U-Bahn. It was just insanity. I had not experienced that in neither in Nuremberg or in Hamburg. It was definitely a unique experience. And I remember that point in my life. I mean, not that I have eradicated that entirely, but I have eradicated part of that. I was such a complainer. I was such a complainer, and poor Melanie, she had to put up with my with such a great part of my complaining self. The grass was always greener on the other side. It was never green enough for me in that present moment. I've been learning to live in that present moment of embracing because there's green grass to be appreciated in the present moment. So we do, we meet there, presentially and physically. Finally, I think the ironic thing about how we the dynamic and the irony about us meeting finally physically is that I think I had introduced you to friends of mine, and you even got to meet them before we even met each other. I think.
Yeah, and I was sending my friends to you when you were in New York.
Of course. I mean, that's we had a good back and forth, man. That makes it all the more special that finally meeting up. But we come to find out each other's existence through this common friend of ours, through Brett. I mean, and it had to do with
I'm trying to
spirituality.
think how were we friends on Facebook? Or was it like MSN Messenger,
No, it
or
was
I can't
Facebook.
remember
It
how
was
we
Facebook.
even.
It was Facebook, and I think it
Um,
was around 2008, 2009, because I was in. If I don't fail to remember, if my memory fails me not. I was in LA at that point, and I was in LA for like 3 4 months around
mm,
2009, and I kind of remember Brett sending me a message and then kind of throwing you in there. Oh, you got to meet this guy. Da 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 da. And I don't know if it was because of Revolution. If at that point you had already gone
I think it was
or
Revolution. Yeah, I went to New York and I went to Revolution in New York. I was only there for for a few weeks. Maybe it was like a month, 4 or 5 weeks. But I was going to Revolution and hang out with Jay, and
hmm,
um, but I was already like familiar with the whole Revolution. I was listening to the podcasts, and
the MP3s.
that was, that's another episode of my life, which is that whole chapter. But Revolution did a big part in sort of me um, feeling some form of new spirituality, new like ideas about life, and um, yeah, it was a good point in my life. So when I think when we met, you were like another one of those like key characters that I was coming into contact with, that were kind of supporting this exploration of a new sort of spiritual perspective that I was
Hmm.
occupied with at the time. Um, yeah, like Brad is one of those people, like they, uh, there were a few people that I was friends with in Sydney at the time. Yeah, so it was
And also the
ju-
common factor was, not that you were congregating there, but the common factor was Hillsong. It was, I mean, we never met when I was in Australia. I mean, and that's just kind of how my ironic life goes, and maybe our ironic life goes. We could have met, but we didn't meet. It's just how life goes. The story tells it that way.
no,
But I go to Australia, and I'm there in Hillsong, which is like the mecca of Christian music and Christian music and worship. Um, but then, being there, I started exploring new, different, not because of it, but in spite of it. Just different ideas and more insurgent and vanguardist ways of experimenting this Christian spirituality that I felt was so maybe monopolized in that setting, in that Hillsong evangelical mega church setting. So we meet, and I, I,
yeah,
I basically I basically go to LA, And then eventually I find myself in New York. I find myself meeting Jay. I think this is 14, 15 years ago. And definitely that period of time, that little parenthesis of my life, being in a church and a bar, set me off in a course of questioning many things, questioning the whole homosexual topic, which was like that big domino, as I've shared with some of my friends here, that fell. That big, I would say, theological domino that fell and then started knocking all these pieces. And meeting Jay, I've actually had Jay on here a couple of times already, and he's been able to share a little bit of his story. So when you're kind of going through that revolution, I don't want to call it phase, but just knowing about it, what was it? Because you had been part of the evangelical world, I know that. But what were your reactions to that evangelical world that you were partaking of, that you find yourself resonating with revolution?
Well, I think it was I don't know, I'm trying to remember how I don't even remember how I came across Jay. Um, I don't know if I read his book. Or, I just somehow online through all of the stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
I was also friends with a few former college students, so they were also on this sort of path of like exploring other avenues or other perspectives on certain things. And um, so when I like started, because I was listening to the before podcasts were a huge thing, there was the Revolution Church podcast, and I used to listen to that all the time, and I would just hear like just this feeling of like we accept everybody, and like just being able to look at Christianity from different angles, and like people would come on who would like had some crazy life story, and you're like, man, I never heard that from the church I was going to.
Mm.
So I always felt like whatever I was going to bring to the table would have been accepted and like celebrated. And so when I went to New York and I went there, also the people that I met there were just like so awesome, and Jay was great, and then when Jay came to Australia a few years later, I ended up being like his buddy chaperone. I was taking him around
Yes, I
town,
remember
and
that.
I got to show him a bit of Sydney, and we had a really good time, and we connected, and it was just nice to, because I like, I was sort of like throw out the baby with the bathwater in terms of like throwing all spirituality out the door, because I think I was just sick of a lot of it. But then I was meeting all these amazing people who were just um, open to new conversations, you know. And I think that was the feelings that I felt like, oh, it's actually okay to have these conversations,
Yeah, and
because I wasn't having
necessary.
them in yeah. Um, and a lot of that again comes down to the relationships that you make in that community.
And where do you find yourself now in that space? And having been, and also part of that question, what has Germany informed you in that department, or what have you found, maybe as you happen to be there, exploring the accidental or the intentional spiritual realm, as you are now, you know.
Well, I don't really know how to define my own personal spirituality, because it's made up of so many different elements, and it continues to be made up of so many different things as I
Mm-hmm.
go on. But obviously, that uh, being brought up Catholic, going to evangelical churches, having that experience formed a lot of, I guess, the basis of what I would call spirituality. But you know, I guess Germany. Man, I was going to different churches in Germany for a little while, but it sort of was a bit. It wasn't really bringing anything new. It wasn't stimulating anything new within me, so I stopped.
Mm-hmm.
And now I sort of, with my yoga practice and meditation, a lot of that for me is just, it's really simple, you know, because for me, spirituality shouldn't be like an idea that I read about and talk about and like it's in my head, it has to sort of have some practical application to my life, whether that means like what I do during the day brings me back to a certain feeling or a certain state that I want to be in order to create something positive. And if that helps other people as well. And so those values that Christianity instilled are still there, but maybe they just um, the way I nurture those is different. Doesn't make sense. Um, I think a lot of it also comes down to having a good like sense of self-inquiry, being aware of your own sort of flaws and accepting them. And when you can accept yours, you can accept others. Yeah, I know. I mean, it's such a like deep topic that
Claro, claro, claro. Of course.
I
This
could
is,
go, I could go, I could go on for hours, and
of
there's
course,
so
of
many
course.
elements to it.
Of course, and I think there's there like what I vibe off of you is that there's an eclectic, just an eclectic nature in it all. Not no
Mm,
singularity,
mm,
no one way path, but a good collective of experiences and narratives, and
mm,
just life as life has been, here, there, everywhere for you. Um, I have one more question, and I
yeah.
like to close off with this question. But before I have that question, I have a good friend of mine that I met through doing these tertuliandos. Marcela from Argentina, and she wanted to know. I'll bring up the question so you can read it in Spanish, answer it in Spanish. And she says, estuve escuchando y haciendo varias cosas a la vez, así que no sé si ella lo dijo. So she's saying that she was listening to you and she's been multitasking, doing for several things at the same time. So she doesn't know if you mentioned it or not, but she wanted to ask. So out of de todos los países is country, de todos los países that you've been in, do you have a favorite one? Whether it been
Prefer.
a favorite country that you've stopped at, gone by, that you have something that you appreciate in it. Perhaps I don't want to butcher her
Mm,
question.
it's funny because I have um, probably we're talking earlier about like that sense of feeling at home.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess there are like five places.
Good. You can
Um,
throw them in.
Australia, obviously Australia. Um, there's Germany, Trinidad and Tobago. Although I haven't really spent much time there in my life, so and as an adult, I haven't been there, so I don't know if being there is also bringing me the sense of home. But for me, like that culture,
Mm-hmm.
the culture around culture is in a way home. But also, I spent a lot of time in Sweden and Denmark, and those are two countries that I really love. I love visiting. I have good friends there, um, and
What did you like
in
about
both
Sweden and
those
Denmark?
places, I felt it. I just felt a sense of like safety. I feel like home. I feel like it's peace, connection to nature. The people are kind. Um, the quality of life is very high, but there's something about it, and I don't know what it is. Like I just feel at ease, even sometimes more than when I'm in Germany. Like in Berlin, maybe I sort of feel like like that like that Berliner Schnauzer I talked about,
Mm-hmm.
that gruff attitude. Um, and I just have so many. Again, it's like around the people that I've gotten to know there and my good friends there, but I just feel so like at ease and at home and safe and secure when I go there. Um, and I spent actually I've spent a lot of time in both places, but I spent like a period of about 4 months in Sweden. A few years ago, I spent the summer there and sort of lived there and just loved it. Just a different pace and different energy. So they're two places that I guess in the like Latino world, that's like polar opposite. It's Scandinavia in terms of like culture, temperament,
Mm-hmm.
climate. Um, and I think people sort of perceive Scandinavian countries like, oh, they're kind of like depressing and winter and cold and quiet and like cold people, but they're really not.
Claro,
They're
claro.
very, even if it's physically cold, they're very warm people, and sometimes you sort of have to like break through the barrier a bit,
Mm-hmm.
but like just delicious, delicious people.
Yeah.
And being there for me is like I jump at any chance to go there. Yeah.
I think it's the same at a level of perception with Germans. Like coming from a place like Australia, a warm place like Australia, where at least the conception or the perception, I should say, of Australians is that they're quite lively, laid back, funny, good sense of humor. Maybe too good of a sense of humor that could be maybe offensive to some. But I think that's something I did like about Australians. I think just that relaxedness and that in general terms, of course, there's no monopoly of personalities, but just the main like culture, just very inclusive in some aspects. That inclusivity of that warmth. It kind of reminded me a little bit of my own Puerto Rican culture. With whatever distinctions there might be. Being such opposite ends, but
Mm,
there's still a little bit of that kind of willing familiarity, even to the stranger.
yeah.
And I guess you can put that stranger in quotation marks because it does not make you feel like a stranger. But then in Germany, you do experience maybe that coldness at first, but then when you kind of crack through, then you kind of have like that friend for life type of dynamic. And every culture responds to something. Every culture responds to the location, to the formation, and that makes it all the
Mm,
more interesting to me. That makes it very interesting. And that any form of homogeneous, capricious wanting that you might want that everyone be the same. As you travel, you break with that. You break. There's no opportunity to that. So I like to close with this
mm,
question about being able to kind of like develop this time capsule, and then you're inputting into this time capsule. You're actually whatever you want to put in there. It could be thoughts, it could be actual physical objects, but this time capsule is going to be is the aspect here is that the time capsule is going to be found by a time ahead, like long from now, by maybe another species, by maybe another specimen, that are going to enter into this live experience, into this thing we call the world. And you're putting into this time capsule things that you consider to be important to you, things that you think would be useful. Not that you're writing a new Bible for them, that you're gonna write a script of how they're gonna live their life, but just things that were important to you, and that could maybe describe this whole thing we call life. And you have the last word, my good friend.
actually, oh my goodness, what in there? Um, I mean, would I put in things that are to do with me personally, or do I just want them to know about like the world in general? Um,
Life, like what
how
life?
many objects?
Oh, whatever, man. The time capsule could be as small or as big as you want it to be.
Oh gosh.
And I guess this is a question about
Hmm,
life. This is a question about
yeah.
enjoying life, about what you valued in life. I actually asked a friend of mine, and you can intertwine it with this question too. Um, what did you like about life?
Well, okay, then these are the elements of life, I think.
That you can
So
put
I
in
think
there.
I
They
would
could be
have to
abstracts in
say,
there.
yeah, I would put in like guitar. I don't play guitar, so it's not really to do with me. But it's
It's
just that
good.
like just the concept of music. It's
Mhm.
like been such a key. It's like it's a key element of everybody's life, I guess. Um, Anyone that can hear music appreciates music on some level, and it spans culture, language, and religion, and it's like it can't be confined to any one place or people or anything. So I think something that represented music, the importance of that, the vibration, people tune into different vibrations with music. So that is probably like one of the key things I would put in there. What else are in there? Like, I want to say book, but if they could read, I don't know what
It's
book I
okay.
would
Just
throw
imagine they
in.
can.
They can read. All right.
Yes.
I would throw in. That's probably a few of one of my key books from that period of my life, like the Revolution period, was Conversations with God. Um,
Who
and
wrote
that
this
was a
book?
life-changing book for me at the time. Neil Donald Walsh. It's a bestseller. It's and he's quite well known. This author now, he's still around. But his first book, Conversations with God, like, is just such a beautiful like time in my life. When I think about reading that book, so I'll probably throw that in there, and then maybe I'll throw in like a papaya and a coconut, just because you can't be too serious when you're drinking coconut water and eating a papaya and a mango. You know, that kind of like the good things in life are really simple.
No, that's good. I can
Something like
relate with
that,
the
I
I can
reckon.
relate with the coconut for sure.
And a hammock. Throw in a hammock for pleasure.
To enjoy the coconut and the pie, of course, and the
There
book
you
and
go. Yeah.
anything that you want to. I mean, that makes it all. You put a hammock and everything kind of becomes a little bit better. You know,
Yeah,
depending on the context you're in. You know, because if you're
that's
in
it.
freezing cold weather, then it's not probably going to be so so enjoyable. But
No.
you find a way. You find a way. Man, Angus, thanks so much, man. Thank you so much
Maybe
for
or maybe even a coffee.
a coffee.
Throw in a
Yes,
coffee.
in
A
case there's no
good
coffee,
Australian
then
flat white.
in case you don't
Yeah.
know what's going to be available over there. Dude, thank you so much, mano. Te envío un abrazo. I send you a hug from far away, man. Thanks for allowing us to have a little bit of a window
Yeah.
in your life and partaking of these small spaces that I've been creating that have been so self therapeutic for me. This has been an exercise of learning and unlearning for me to start with. And I know people that have been coming in, passing by, tuning into yours. In other tertulians I've had, the feedback has been just very benevolent for me to receive. That people just hearing other people's life story can be kind of like a little bit healing too. To find yourself in
Mm,
similar, and regardless of how far we might be, the human connection is always going to be there. Um, So, Mano Gracia, I do hope that sooner than later we can get to have, like a sit down, an actual physical sit down, and how
I
it's
would
meant
love
to be.
that. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. By the way, I don't
yeah,
think you're in Houston. You're in Houston, right? Right now.
I'm in Houston at the moment, but as this thing dissipates, this will be a point of departure again for me to wherever it might
Fun
be.
fact is that my very first German teacher now lives in Houston.
Ah, see what you had
So
told me. That is a fun fact. So the
uh,
Houston is a point of connection to you in some way.
yeah, so there's that little connection. Yeah,
Full circle, entirely. Never
yeah,
underestimate any kind of
yeah. I
any
should
kind of
probably
coincidence.
Catherine Hatfield, if you come across her. She's Australian, but she's been living in Texas for many years now. So
You
if you
can
come
tag
across
her
her,
in this video.
I will. I will. Yeah, she might see it.
But hermano, keep safe, man. Keep living in the present.
You too.
Any projects that are ahead of you, throw my way. I definitely want to see that El Angelito movie. I definitely want to see little Angus in
Oh yeah.
his early 90s mode. I'll enjoy that for sure, man. So, gracias, un millón, un abrazo, people. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Thank you so much
Gracias.
for
Un
being.
abrazo.
Muy bien, hermano. And I like to close off with this thought from a quite a famous Puerto Riqueño. May he rest in peace. He was a well-known psychic, and he used to close off with these just very basic words, but I think they're so transcendental. So, mucha paz y mucho amor. Until next time, guys and girls.
Perfect.